Welcome to Et al., a podcast from Baylor University Press, where we interview authors and publishing experts to bring you the best scholarship in the fields of scriptural, historical, and theological studies, as well as the world of academic publishing. Thanks for joining us. Today's episode of Et al. Is the Baylor Libraries Author Series on God of the Whirlwind, Horror, Memory, and Story in Black Waco, featuring Baylor University Press author Dr. Tyler Davis, who is joined on the panel by contributors LaRue Dorsey, Linda Lewis, and Michael Babers. We hope you will enjoy this conversation.
Good evening, everyone. Wonderful to have you here tonight. So my name's Charlie Walter. I'm the director of the Mayborn Museum, and we're so proud and so happy to be able to host this event tonight. And we'll have a wonderful panel and a great discussion, so thank you for being here. Before we get started tonight, I wanted to read Baylor's land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that Baylor University in Waco and its original campus in Independence are on the land and territories originally occupied by indigenous peoples, including the Waco and Tawakoni of the Wichita and affiliated tribes, the Tonkawa, the Numanuu Comanche, Karankawa, and Lipan Apache. These indigenous peoples were dispossessed of and removed from their lands over centuries by European colonization and American expansionism. In recognition of these native nations, we are the original stewards, in recognition that these native nations are the original stewards of Baylor's campus locations, the university strives to build sustainable relationships with sovereign native nations and indigenous communities through education offerings, partnerships, and community service. So thank you again for being here, and I'm going to turn it over to Stephen Reed, Vice Provost for Faculty Diversity and Belonging. Stephen. Thank you.
Well, welcome, friends. I am pleased to welcome all of you here in person and a number of people online. Hi, people online. I welcome you on behalf of President Linda Livingstone, Provost Brickhouse, and Baylor University. The Community Race Relations Coalition and the City of Waco recognize the centennial and the historical marker acknowledging the lynching of Jesse Washington. During the session, we heard about the correlation of the lynching and the Waco horror of 1916 and the tornado of 1954. I remember thinking that would be a great idea for a book. And now we have a book. I want to thank Dr. Tyler Davis, Baylor PhD 2021, who brought this book together, and the authors, some of whom are here tonight. The organic intellectuals, the people who brought our thoughts together with their lives. And we appreciate that. LaRue Dorsey, Linda Lewis, and Michael Babers. I also want to thank Josh Mobley from Baylor Press. There's Josh. And Dean Jeffrey Archer. As well as friends Charles Walters, who you've seen, Jonathan Tran, who will be speaking next, and Stephen Sloan, who's going to help us be part of a lively conversation. Baylor is a private Christian university, and if President Livingstone was here, I would say a Research One university. Appreciates this volume for two reasons. First, Baylor is about belonging in place. I remember a television commercial, and a young child approaches the microphone and then gets up and tells about the important things of Texas. Brisket, chicken fried steak, good peach cobbler, and then he sits down. At the end of the commercial, the sign for Frostbank comes up. And it says, "We're from here." You know, this story is not about Baylor, and Baylor is not the focus of the book. But Baylor recognizes that it is part of the Waco community, and the Waco community is part of Baylor. And that's one reason why Baylor celebrates this book. The other reason is the God of Scripture. Now, I spent most of my life teaching Hebrew and Bible. And so as a Christian university with Jewish faculty, we pay attention to theological conversations like tonight. The title of the book, God of the Whirlwind, Horror, Memory, and the Story of Black Waco, reminded me as a Bible scholar of the last chapters of the book of Job. In the book of Job, God speaks out of the whirlwind, out of the tornado. The God of this book is an activist God, not a God who crawled off after creation to watch the cowboys do what the cowboys do, waiting for the clock to run out and justice to really come by. No, this is an activist God, and there's a lynching and there's a tornado. There's a lot of talk in theology and philosophy about whether the age of an active God is over and progress has replaced it. But the testimonies you're going to read in this book or have read in this book are going to give you a different sort of theology. And that's a question that Baylor likes. What type of God do we serve? Is this a God who is still acting? Or is this an age when enchantment and miracles and plagues are over? Well, it'll be a good conversation. Welcome and thank you. This should be an interesting time tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Reed. My name is Jonathan Tran. I'm the Associate Dean for the Honors College here at Baylor, and I have the great honor and privilege of introducing our very, very esteemed guests. These are folks who have legendary and iconic status in this city and have deep roots into its profound history. So let me introduce the contributors first, and then I'll introduce Dr. Sloan, who will be moderating, and then Dr. Davis. So LaRue Dorsey, and it's great to read about these introductions. I've heard about these folks from around Waco, certainly from Tyler and different people in the community, but it's really amazing to introduce them officially. So our contributors, LaRue Dorsey has dedicated her life to helping young people learn. She taught for over 62 years, including 16 years as the director of the renowned LaRue's Learning Center, which supported the education of children from Black and low-income families in Waco. Next is Linda Jan Lewis, is a Waco native and former elections commissioner for McLendon County. She's a descendant of people enslaved on the Stroud plantation, a participant in the revolutionary freedom movements of the 1960s, and a self-described Catholic hippie thriving in Waco, the Vatican City of Baptists. Reverend Michael Babers is Associate Minister at St. Luke African Methodist Episcopal Church in Waco, a longtime community activist. Babers has been involved with the NAACP and the Community Race Relations Coalition. So welcome, you three, and we're really looking forward to the conversation with you three. Now let me introduce the author, one of the editors of the book, and then the moderator. So first, the moderator is Dr. Stephen Sloan, is professor of history and director of the Institute of Oral History at Baylor University. He is an executive director of the National Oral History Association and the creator of the website and podcast Waco History. Dr. Sloan is also the current holder of the Cornelia Marshall Smith Professor of the Year Award, and it's extremely well deserved, not least because Dr. Sloan has a wonderful jump shot in basketball. Tyler Davis, the author of the book God of the Whirlwind, earned his doctorate in theological studies from Baylor University and currently serves as a research administrator and adjunct professor in the Mexican American Studies program and Department of Theology at St. Mary's University in San Antonio, Texas. Let me just say a quick word about Dr. Davis. Dr. Davis did his PhD here. He also did his undergraduate degree at Baylor. I remember meeting Dr. Davis. He wrote a paper in a class of mine, and I could not believe it was written by an undergrad. To this day, Tyler Davis knows more about critical theory, critical race theory than anyone I know. Not only does he have an incredible mastery of its incredible breadth and depth, but he thinks very smartly about it. It wasn't surprising then when he returned to Baylor to do his PhD from Princeton that he wanted to do a project as critically important as this one. Tyler had caught word through his deep relationships in the community about how Black churches narrated the tornado of 1953, sorry. And I was thinking about, and its deep connection to the way that narration happens, and what Du Bois ended up calling the Waco Horror, the lynching of Jesse Washington. He ended up writing a dissertation in which he argues he took on one of the foremost theological ethicists in America, who argued that Christians should be very careful about what they associate with God, with the clear worry about certain forms of Christian nationalism associating God with certain types of political affairs. Tyler both granted that part of the argument, but he said if people, especially oppressed people or people who live in the margins, are not able to tell the story of God with rich concepts of horror, memory, and story and narrative, then we lose the power to name God as located in freedom struggles of the kind you'll hear tonight. And so that was the beginning of Tyler's work on this, and it wasn't surprising that in that work from that dissertation, then he next turned to making sure that featured in this story were people who held this history and embodied it with their very lives. And so this event tonight that Dr. Sloan will moderate is very much a product of the hope to hear these stories. And so we're looking forward to a great conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Tran. And I want to congratulate each of you for making it through the introductions. This is what we do at Baylor. And so we're so happy to have you here. We're going to have a time of conversation. Tyler gets to go last. We're going to have a time of a conversation here. I'm going to save about 15 minutes at the end for questions, so be thinking as our speakers share some of their stories. If you have questions, we want you to ask that as well. I'll keep my comments brief. I'm a historian and an oral historian, so I'll talk about the history side of me. So the two events that really what we're talking about revolve around is the horrific lynching of Jesse Washington on May 15th, 1916. A horrific event that's, of course, cast a long shadow in the community. The other horrific event that this touches is the tornado, May 11th, 1953, the Waco tornado, an F5 tornado that hit downtown Waco, which was a devastating tornado that was really incomprehensible, the damage that it did to the Waco community. We could talk about the history of those events, but the oral historian in me knows we're here to talk about something that's probably a little more powerful in the lived experience of those events, and that's the living memory of those events, how they operate in the community for individuals, for families, for Black communities within Waco. And our panel has done the favor. Tyler knew enough to know the expertise on that did not lie in a book. Tyler knew the expertise on that lied in the community and going out and talking to community folks to gather their experiences. I think it was Stephen Sloan that once said, I'm quoting myself, which is the ultimate academic thing to do. In trying to convince somebody to do an oral history, if you don't speak for yourself, someone else is going to speak for you. And so we're all grateful, I know Tyler's grateful that the folks for this project chose to speak for themselves, and we're all richer because they've lent their expertise and their understanding of both of these events. And so I want to invite, so thank you first off, for participating in this project. But I think I'll start with Mrs. Lewis. If you would talk just a little bit about, as you began to think of what you wanted to say about these two events and how they may have been connected or not connected, what are some things you wanted to make sure you included in telling about your experiences with them?
Well, although I self-identify as a hippie Catholic.
He's going to get you out.
Okay. Although I self-identify as a hippie Catholic, I grew up in Greater Mount Olive Baptist Church, and I grew up in a neighborhood where there was a church on every corner, and across the street from the State Tabernacle of the Church of God in Christ. I was the youth Baptist Bible scholar, so I knew all the Bible verses. And and I was always a child with a great imagination. And when the tornado struck, although I was 6 years old, I felt that God was saying something to Waco to change Waco. That was my 6-year-old impression. And down through the years, one of the things that I do know is some of the absolute best people are from Waco. They may not necessarily still be here, but they're from Waco. And I think that the experience of that 1953 tornado in the middle of real segregation did something for us to at least begin to have conversations and begin to have experiences. It's so amazing to me to go off to the University of Texas and from there to interact with people from Waco, all ages, all economic classes. But what we had in common was the Waco tornado. And because of that, it allowed for us to have some conversations about religion, about what our beliefs are.
One of the things that you mentioned in your story, as you include it, is you call Waco a Black Mecca.
Absolutely.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about what you meant by that?
I grew up in East Waco. It was totally, absolutely segregated. And because of that, my teachers at Carver High had masters and PhDs. There were black doctors, the black newspaper, Mr. Harvey went to our church, Greater Mount Olive. There were just any kind of black experience you wanted. I grew up in the midst of that. We even had a neighborhood wino, like Richard Pryor talked about. And my parents were of that generation where you had to do for yourself. My grandfather was a World War I veteran. He was basically a Garveyite from outside of Montgomery, Alabama. And his attitude was that black men had to take care of their families, that they had to have, if it took 2 jobs or 3 jobs or a job and a side hustle, black men had to take care of their families because they were powerless once they crossed the river. Whatever happened to their women, they had very little recourse. So I spent my entire childhood until I left to go to UT Austin in a black community. Once I got to UT and learned about, remember the 50s and the African countries moving away from their colonizers and declaring independence, I was intrigued about South Africa. My other name for the Waco I grew up in is I call it Soweto, like Soweto, except in what I learned in history is that the people in Soweto, South Africa, probably had a few more freedoms than I did growing up. That is my experience. I don't look at it as adversity. I look at it as what made us tough and resilient and never ever accepting a no. I was one of those kids that got in trouble by asking why. Why do I have to do this? Why is that this way? I wanted to know who were the white men who decided I needed to go to a segregated school. Why? How did they get away with that?
Thank you so much. You can hear the activist in there, right? It needs to change.
I'm that generation.
Yes.
We came here to make a change.
Yeah. Ms. Dorsey, would you share a little bit about, as you've kind of lived this experience and thought about the way in which this story was passed down to you, both of the tornado and of the Jesse Washington lynching?
Well, the tornado, I was teaching in Wilmington, Texas. I had no idea, we didn't have TVs then. I just heard on the radio some scratching. And I was trying to figure out what is this, and I finally, they said it's the tornado in Waco. Well, first thing I did was get on the phone to call my daddy. I couldn't get him till 4 o'clock that morning, and he told me about the tornado. But when I came to Waco, everything who had been in the path of the tornado was through what we call black community. It was called Bridge Street at that time. And it had all the businesses in Bridge Street, and everything was gone, and they never built it back. But as she was saying, that we had all kinds of stores and businesses, record drugstore and all that was on Bridge Street. And we never saw that again after it was torn down, you know. But during Jesse Washington's time, I wasn't born. I'm old, but I'm not that old.
I was not suggesting that. I was not suggesting that. We can run the tape back. I did not suggest that.
Yeah. I'm 92, and I thank God for that. But
yes, that deserves a round of applause.
But during Jesse Washington time, my stepdaddy was 16 years old, and he saw Jesse Washington being killed. And he left town that day with Barnum Circus. He slipped off, and his parents didn't know where he was. He was scared to death that he's going to be the next person that they were going to hang. And so that's what he did. He stayed with them 20 years before he came back to Waco. Then he left and went to Detroit. He never lived in Waco anymore because he was frightened. During that time, he said that black men were afraid to be in Waco because they didn't know what was going to happen. They were accused of all kinds of things. And so he said he was just frightened to death, you know. And that's what he told us about Jesse Washington's story, you know. That's the only thing I know about it because I wasn't here at that time.
You established that 3 times, I think. She was not here. All right.
I have a sense of humor.
Again, some things you don't have to say. We know you have a sense of humor. That's been established. Reverend Babers, if you would talk to us a bit about these two things as you've encountered them, both the memory of both and the ways in which you see them as connected or not connected in the community.
Okay, the first time I heard about the lynching of Jesse Washington, I was in college in Austin, Texas at UT, and a friend of mine from New York City asked me where I was from, and I told him Waco. And he said, oh, that's the place where they lynch people. And I said, take that, I was like, take that back. We're not going to lynch people in Waco. And so somehow he found a copy of it. It might have been an Ebony or maybe a Jet magazine because they had lots of pictures in the Jet magazine. And he showed me a picture of the lynching of Jesse Washington that was that had been publicized throughout America, taken by the Gildersleeve photographer. And I was blown away that I never learned about it while I was here in Waco, because I grew up here in Waco and never heard about it here. And then I moved back to Waco in my 30s. And they began to talk. I knew about the tornado of 1953, and my grandparents got married in 53. So they told me some things about the tornado of 53. But it wasn't until I went to a book signing and a conference led by, I forget what the author, Susan Bernstein, was it? Patricia Bernstein, thank you, Joe. Patricia Bernstein wrote a book, The Waco Horror, the lynching of Jesse Washington. When we began to talk about the lynching of Jesse Washington, they linked the two. The Jesse Washington lynching and the tornado of 53, which was the first time I ever heard the two talked about together. There were two churches that were invited to this event. Antioch Baptist Church, the black church on the south side, and 7th and James Baptist Church. And Sister Dorsey, you remember we went to hear this lady speak about it. And that was the first time. And as we were leaving, a friend of mine said, you know what happened? When Jesse Washington was lynched, he told me the details, how he was burned, how he was hanged, how he was fingers cut off, all of his extremities, and then drugged throughout the city of Waco, especially in the black neighborhoods. And then the tornado in 1953 took the same exact route that took. Now, in white circles, they acknowledge the tornado of 53 as a tragedy. But in black Waco, we acknowledged the tornado of 53 as God's vengeance. God helping and hearing the cry of the oppressed. In 1916, Jesse Washington had nobody to defend him. But in 1953, God avenged the black community. And that's the way we thought about it. I didn't have, like these two ladies will, and Sister Dorsey will remind you, none of us were that old.
Can y'all stop bringing that up? We know she was not that old.
But I did have a great-grandmother. And my great-grandmother was born in 1910. My great-grandmother didn't talk very much. But I was able to visit her and ask her a question. I asked her about the lynching. I said, were you here when they did that? And she said, yes. I said, were you able to witness any of it? And she said, yes. I was a little girl, and we were playing in the yard. And Mama said, y'all come on in the house in a hurry. And so they came into the house. She said, but being a little girl, she wanted to see what she had to come in the house for. And she looked outside the window, and she was able to see him drugged through the streets. And because there are reasons why people don't hear things and things are not shared. One, because it's painful to relive those memories. And then two, sometimes, well, in most cases, children just don't hear those stories. And then there's another reason, is because black people were afraid that the same thing might happen to them. So me getting a first person opinion or explanation was a blessing to me, and it opened my eyes to what happened, and I began to see it as what I explained before. It was y'all have to help me. I just went through chemotherapy, and I have chemo fog, and things are spinning around. But I saw the connection of this is what happened. This is how we experience it. You experience it your one way because you come from a different culture. We experience it this way because of our lived experience. It may be right, it may be wrong, but because of our lived experiences and our faith, our theology, and our community, this is the way we saw it. And I was blessed to have somebody to actually give me a firsthand experience.
Yeah, thank you, Reverend Babers. Perfectly clear, Appreciate that. Yes, go ahead, Ms. Lewis.
If I may jump in
Please.
On this age thing.
She wasn't there either.
No. I'm the first generation in my family to be raised in town, in Waco. My parents are from Falls County, my mother from Marlin, and my grandparents from Robertson County, from a little black community outside of the big town of Calvert. And so they did not move to Waco until World War II, 1946-45. Their only child went in the Army, and they moved to Waco. I was born in 1946, 30 years after 1916, and the black people in rural communities knew all about Jesse Washington. They knew the folklore. They, as Reverend said, they were very cautious about moving about in the community because there was no perceived protection.
Right.
Until I was 16 and my best friend got a driver's license, I was not allowed to cross the Brazos River unless I was with an adult because I had a mouth. And my grandparents lived next door. They just knew that if I crossed the Brazos River past Bridge Street, because Bridge Street was wonderful, past Bridge Street, then if I got in any trouble, that they couldn't protect me. My grandparents also passed on the story that Jesse Washington wasn't the only black man that got lynched on the bridges on the Brazos River. And because of the religious whatever, there were stories that on full moons at night, you could hear them screaming from the Brazos River. I just find it so ironic that that whole symbol of death and lynchings comes from the river whose name is the arms of God. Brazos de Dios means the arms of God. So it's like God in his arms held those people who were lynched. But I could go to Bledsoe Miller Park on the banks of the Brazos River where I learned all kinds of things, how to swim, summer school, all those things. But I better not get on that bridge and try to cross the Brazos River.
But with us, we lived in South Waco, so we had to come to town. It was amazing to me that we had to go 8 blocks to use the bathroom because we couldn't go in the stores downtown. And we had to go to the Urban Station, which was downtown on 8th and Austin, to use the bathroom. And everybody was afraid to go to town. You had to have somebody with you because you were scared that you were going to be lynched and put off the sidewalk, pushed off the sidewalk or something like that. And I was a little girl at that time, and I couldn't understand why this was happening. But the older I got, the more I saw why it was happening. You know, people didn't have compassion, one thing, and they didn't know us. See, if you know somebody, then you don't do that kind of stuff to them, but they didn't get to know each other. You know, during that time. I don't know whether they didn't want to try to know each other or we just didn't know each other. But I'm glad that God let me live long enough to see some change. And it got better after the war, after people got equal jobs and things like that. But they were still afraid to go out of town. Some old people you couldn't get to go to town because they were just afraid. And to me that was so sad that you live in a place that you're scared to go to town, you know, and they only went to town on Saturdays because most of the time they were working. People were farmers back in those days, and they came to town on Saturdays, you know. And so it amazes me now how the world is now. It's completely changed than what it was when I was a kid.
Waco, excuse me. Waco, when I came along, Waco still is divided.
Yeah, it's divided.
Very divided. And if you ask somebody about Waco who is not from here, they'll tell you what our reputation is. One, David Koresh, who we have no link to. They were not from here. And the Jesse Washington lynching. And having those things haunting us, or as part of our history, everybody's history has some good and bad. But if we don't come at it and deal with it, and I thank God for the CRRC that Joe Welter is here with me tonight, and I thank God for her being here. You and Tim, thanks for coming. We took on the task of facing and doing something to commemorate this event, but not just commemorating this event. We wrote a resolution that not only acknowledged the lynching, and not just Jesse Washington's lynching, because St. Majors was also lynched, and some others that I can't remember that were lynched. But the whole lynching culture, lynching did have one purpose: to keep us in line, to make us afraid, because this is what they're going to do to you. And Waco, under that cloud, under that burden, needed to do something. Now, the reason was monetarily, because Baylor wanted President George Bush's library. They wanted to be in the running, because he was here at the time. Well, he spent a lot of time here. And we were trying to get Waco's reputation clean enough to where he would want to have his library here. And so when we did that, we had to deal with those two things. Well, we got past David Koresh because he wasn't from here. But we had to do something about this lynching. So we wrote a resolution, that beautiful resolution, that acknowledged and repented, heartfelt repentance for the lynching culture, that we would never go back to that. And we were met with such resistance that it never got done. At that time, it was 90 years afterwards. But it didn't get done until 2 years ago, was it, Joe? That we were able to put up the historical marker?
Yeah, the marker.
Yeah, when the centennial happened.
Yeah.
Is when the marker, yeah.
The centennial was 2016. 100 years and still no marker, but it actually got it a couple of years ago. We were able to do that. And under that cloud, everything you do is not going to be successful. And Waco has to admit that. We're trying to grow, and we've got to get past our demons. You got to deal with them head on. Not everything is pretty. Some things are ugly, but you got to deal with them. And that was our mission, to get Waco, deal with Waco's past.
Yeah, thank you, Reverend Babers. So there's so much in each of their stories. That's why we're going to have the book out there for you to get. I wish we could touch on more, but I want to turn to Tyler and just your decision, Tyler, to do these interviews, to talk to these experts. A lot of scholars can do it without doing that. Just talk about that process and getting out and meeting folks and how you're thinking on this idea. What was an idea that was shared with you? Stevie Walker Webb shared it with you. How it evolved through talking through folks that had experienced it in their communities.
Yeah. So as Dr. Tran mentioned, and I think as we've been talking about, I was initially struck when I first heard the story from Stevie Walker Webb that connected 1916, 1953, Jesse Washington and the tornado. But I also, I felt that I needed to talk to more folks besides Stevie to see what they had to say about it. And in the process, I think, I think maybe one way to say it is the title of the book is called God of the Whirlwind, right? It's about this whirlwind story. But it's really about a lot more than just that. It's about people's stories, right? People's stories, people's memories, and the way those stories and memories intersect, especially in the history of struggles, struggles against racism, struggles against injustice. So the Whirlwind story is a kind of takeoff point, but from conversations with Reverend Babers, Ms. Dorsey, Linda Jan Lewis, a larger picture, a larger history, a kind of larger galaxy of memories and struggles emerged. And so, I think, the book is about this one story, God of the Whirlwind. It's actually really about a community that told one. Some folks told that story, others didn't. But what was shared, I think, is this spirit of struggle. And that emerged, I think, more clearly to me in talking to folks and the process of making the book. So it's mistitled, I guess is what I'm saying.
So don't buy the book. It's title's off.
Yeah.
So one of the things that struck me in reading some of your stories, they talk about the past isn't even past, and George Floyd came up in some of these narratives as you talked about the ways in which it's a living memory, right? It continues to live on and evolve and change. And so I've been interested in hearing your opinions on that, just this idea of why is this story such a powerful one that continues to have a life within the community?
Well, for me, because, I'm probably an iconic baby boomer, and so the millennials, things happened a few years ago. They didn't, it repeats itself. Yeah, they have George Floyd, but we had Emmett Till. It repeats itself because somehow, in order of acknowledging, addressing, and fixing the problem, we just name it something new. And it keeps going on. My NAACP president, Dr. Peaches, is out there. And we have to tell young people that DEI is just affirmative action's grandchild.
Yes, it is.
Things happen, and it's so interesting. I have a niece, Dr. Vanessa Lewis Ellison, and she tells people that I picked cotton when I was a child. I actually did. I was the world's worst cotton picker, by the way.
I was.
And then the issue of black and colored water fountains. One of my favorite memories from childhood is my dad would take us to the big Montgomery Ward that was downtown on the white side of the square. And while he was paying his bills, we would take turns and drink out of the white fountain when nobody was looking. And guess what? The white fountain was cold, had cold water. The colored fountain did not, but the white fountain had a whole bunch of bubble gum, nasty bubble gum around it. But that happened to me in my lifetime here in Waco. So, you know, the good and the bad, and the fact that it's not ancient history. There are issues, problems, and situations that will continue to repeat if we don't face them, acknowledge them, and solve them. And Reverend Babers, I agree with you. It appears to me that in addition to the economic and racial segregation in Waco, what I've experienced most of my life is a psychological segregation.
Yeah.
If you have one or two people who are as melanated as me, that's not integration.
No.
That's tokenism.
Yes, it is.
And it's an insult to all of the brilliant, excellent Black people. My answer to people who say, well, I've never met another Black person like you. You are this. I said, well, next time I go to Waco, I'll take you with me because I'm the oldest of 6. And so at some point, we do have to work on affirmative action's grandchildren. We have to work on diversity.
Yes.
We have to work on inclusion. And we certainly have to have equity, and we don't now. So my participation in this story and in all the things that I've done is to raise that mirror and say, we ain't finished yet, y'all.
That's good.
I'm here to help work on it.
So, Mrs. Dorsey, you get the last word. So, Reverend Babers, do you have thoughts on this?
Yes. Oral history. Tell the story.
Yes.
We need to know. My parents also pick cotton. But Mama said it's pull cotton. Didn't pick cotton. That's too much to do. Pull cotton. Tell the stories. They're making legislation to whitewash all our history. Mm-hmm. They won't know unless we tell it. Our children have to hear it. You know what my hope for this is? I hope it ends up on the banned book list. All right. We've got to tell the story. If they don't hear it, they won't know. We need to get together and share. There's so much. If y'all are baby boomers, they call us Generation X, but we were really, what were we? We were busters. They just changed the name to Generation X. I don't know why. I guess it's because we were missing. But we need to share, tell the stories so they will know and understand. Talk to people so you can understand them. Then there's no room for hate. If we can do that, then what we're doing here will be successful. And it'll be what I think it's intended to do.
Amen.
The only thing that
Mrs. Dorsey. Yeah, please.
the only thing that I can add to what these two people have said is that we need to put God first.
Yeah.
And ask Him to help us become what He wants the world to be like. In this situation where we live in now, it's completely turned upside down. And so we need some people who would be willing to talk to each other and find out about each other's culture. Mm-hmm. The thing that hurts me most of all is our young people do not come back to Waco. They go somewhere else. Number one, they say there's nothing to do in Waco. And number two, they say they're still treated the same way they were when they were children. That hurts my heart, to know that you're born in the city and you don't want to come back to the city. So my prayer is that we would get together and just call somebody and say, I saw you, I know you, let's have a conversation and I learn about your history, you learn about mine. That's one of the things I think would help us out so much. You know, when I was a little girl going downtown and things like that, it was amazing to me that we couldn't even try on the clothes that we buy.
You better not. You bought it.
You had to hold it up like this. How in the world you know what you're going to wear, holding a dress up like this? We had such a horrible time, but God has been kind to let us live and see some of the things that we wanted to have in this world. That's my point.
Thank you so much. We promised an opportunity for y'all to have questions. I think Carl's going to have a mic for you. So for our panel, for our author, yes, sir.
Yes, I noticed.
Hello. What?
Did you want this one?
This silly box mic you're going to talk into.
Yeah, I noticed the Reverend made the comment earlier about the fact that this lynching was a lynching culture, and I thought that was fitting, very much so. I'm actually from Dothan, Alabama, so I grew up in the Deep South, and I came out of high school in '75, came to Waco about '77 to go to Paul Quinn. Well, at that time, of course, this idea of Jesse Washington never come up.
No.
It never come up in my, and I went to a HBCU, and Jesse Washington did not come up in our studies.
No, it didn't.
And it was right here in Waco.
Right here.
And so, of course, we used to go out and we used to go and read the markers around, you know, because of course we were on foot. We didn't have vehicles. So we went through the park of Cameron Park and all these areas, and we was looking at all of these various markers that they had for historical events. But none of this stuff was even mentioned.
No.
So my question is this: if lynching was certainly a culture, as it was, cultures normally have trends, and those trends change, but very small. And so you can go and see even dress trends. They're coming back to those right to this day. So trends have a way of coming back, is all I'm saying. Yeah. And I want to know what would you suggest that because a lot of this is buried in racism. Mm-hmm. What can a society live in a city, a great city like Waco is? What can we do as a society to eliminate the possibility of those trends making small changes that then coming right back to the same thing we started with?
All right, great question. Anybody on our panel want to respond to that?
Lovey, I agree with Reverend Babers. What is written is what happened and what exists. And one of the people that I certainly admire is Maya Angelou, who just gave us an assignment. We have to tell our own stories, mm-hmm. and we have to sing our own songs. And I also, Mrs. Dorsey, you're absolutely right. Religions always had their schools. And I think that we need to go back to that. Go back to having Saturday schools, going back to have Baptist training schools, mm-hmm. not just the religion, but the history. Right. The AMEs have done a great job with that. But we have to tell our own stories, mm-hmm. sing our own songs, and share them. The danger is this: the Gen Xers who were bused, who went to school with white kids, now have grandchildren.
Yeah.
And so the education and the economics is not equal. However, there's a lot more interaction. And young people, I really admire them because they are of the Linda Lewis cult. They want to know why. Mm-hmm. Why is this happening? How is this going on? And so I think more books like Tyler's book, more events like this, more of us teaching Saturday school or evening school or having podcasts. One of the things that the age that we're now in, where everybody has a camcorder, I'm a Star Trek, where everybody has a communicator, there is, in my humble opinion, very little news, because news is new information. But we have all kinds of non-conventional ways of sharing information. And one of the other things that Maya Angelou said is that it is ridiculous to expect your colonizers and your enslavers to tell your story. That doesn't make any sense.
May I follow up?
Quickly, please, yeah.
I will. What I understand, and I hear what you're saying, that we must tell our story, and I'll agree with that. Yeah. But I don't want that story to be where you're playing to the choir. You know, if you're singing to the choir, everybody in the choir is already aware of all that. You're telling your stories amongst each other, but you're not the one that needs to be affected by that. It needs to be the most masses that are not getting the story.
Well, one of the things that we, is my mic on?
Yes.
One of the things, exactly what Ms. Jan said, telling the story. But you have to first admit that there's a problem. Mm-hmm. Waco needs to come clean. Mm-hmm. We have a problem. Houston, we have a problem. They don't, you know, one of the things that you can piss racist, excuse me for losing that language, I'm a speaker.
We'll allow it.
You know how you can people off, racist people off, is call them a racist. And that's what we need to do, tell the truth. There's too much lie. Baby, we got a lying chief in the White House right now who's telling enough lies for us, nobody else. We ought to have, nobody in the world should lie anymore, because he's lied, taken all of our lying quotients, and you don't get to lie no more. So, but we need to tell the truth and tell it, and don't let them tell the truth for you, because they'll take your truth and they'll pervert it. That's why they took the 1619 project and defined it before we could. And then they came up with woke to be a bad thing, when woke ain't nothing but you being aware of where you come from and what your struggles are and what you need to do to get to where you want to go. Woke ain't a bad thing, baby. I was born woke. Liberal is not a bad thing. My Bible says to be liberal in all that you do. Mm-hmm. So liberal ain't a bad thing. Don't let them define you. You define your own self, and don't let them put labels on you. Mm-hmm. But tell your truth and keep telling it to your children, because I'm gonna tell you what, at this point in my life, I'm gonna tell you all the truth. I'm gonna have one of those transparent moments. I cuss a little. And I'm gonna probably go see Jesus cussing a little. So that's me. But there's a generation that's coming up. They can change. So by telling the truth to our children, we can change them. This next generation, there's hope. Some of us, we're going to be what we are. Mm-hmm. We're going to the great.
That's a good word. We got a question up here and then right here. Yeah.
Hello. I'm sorry. Your questions are probably more important than mine. Thank you all. It's an honor to get to hear from you. I'll toot my Waco horn for a second. My dad was born here in 1956, went to Richfield High School. I was born at Hillcrest Hospital, the one that doesn't exist anymore, in 1992. So I'm a Wacoan. And I would just love to hear, talking about kind of the schools in East Waco and all the segregation that still exists. I would just love to hear about your dreams for Waco, what you hope to see in the next 50 years. When we hit 2060, what would you hope Waco looks like?
What she said? I didn't really understand what she said.
She said, what would you like to see?
What would be your dreams for Waco over the next 50 years?
Oh, my goodness. I'd like to see it much better than what it is now. That's for real.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd like to see that people were getting along together, that there's no hate anymore, that all the hate be gone, that people be able to help each other. Everybody needs some help from someplace. I work with the homeless now. And the lady said, why you spend all that time working with the homeless people? I said, all of us are just one paycheck away from being homeless.
You're right.
Mm-hmm. And you have to help somebody. You put on this earth to help somebody, just not yourself. And so my hope is that everybody be working together to be like it's going to be in heaven. In heaven it's going to be altogether different. It's not going to be white folk on this side and Mexican on this side and black folk on this side.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to all be together. And so we can be all together here if we follow what the Bible says. I joke a lot, but I don't play about God.
No.
And I know that God, what his word said is true. And if we do what he said do, we're going to get together. You're going to be together. That's my hope.
I agree. Yes.
I was going to say, someone sent to me in Facebook a statement that said, exposure breeds expansion. And this is what we've been talking about in terms of talking to each other. I remember when our neighbors moved in across the street, I took over some sweets. And, it was my way of getting to know people. I mean, I think that's one thing that is missing in this whole scenario is that we don't talk to each other.
That's right.
We don't understand or get to know each other. Sunday is probably the most segregated day of the whole week because we go to our respective churches and we don't see each other other than at our jobs, maybe. I'm retired, so I don't see anybody, except when I'm out. But I think one of the things that someone else also said was, what you said was in terms of the one thing that you can hurt people, not hurt people, but make people think perhaps, is to call a racist a racist. And I have a couple of shirts that I wear to the Y. And one of the shirts says, stop pretending your racism is patriotism.
Right.
And it's not to make people angry, but it's to make people think.
Yes.
And I'm from Chicago, so I'm not from Waco. I'll say that, so I come from a place where I'm liberal and it's okay to be liberal. Right. It's okay to speak your mind. I speak my mind. And I speak it through the shirt at the Y, but also it's a statement. It's also saying to people, think about what you're saying, think about what you're doing, think about how you're treating people, but also think about how you're feeling about me, not because you know me, but because of the color of my skin. You don't know me, but you perhaps made some rash decisions about who I am because of the color of my skin. So think about that and don't call it patriotism. So I think for me, it's more about, as everyone has already said, the idea of talking to each other, of taking a moment. I remember I was at the airport coming from Arizona. I was a late flight, and this lady had been looking at me for quite a while, and I'm thinking, okay, what's going on here? And we wanted to get our baggage. She stopped and she said, you look kind. I said, I do, really? I'm trying to get my luggage and get out of here. I don't look too kind. I don't feel very kind. But she said, can I ask you a question? And it was right before the election. She said, I had on my Democratic shirt, and she said, why are you voting, for this person? And I said, okay, I'm tired. I got to drive 2 hours, get home from Dallas back to Waco. But I took the time to talk to her about why I was going to vote. Not to sway her, but she asked. And I don't know if she voted, how she voted. We didn't discuss it. But I took the time to ask to talk to her about how I felt. And not just because I'm a Democrat or you're a Republican or whatever, but the reasons I was, voting this way. So I think if we take that moment to just elicit conversations, make sure that we're listening, make sure that we're talking, make sure that we're understanding but also make sure that we stick to our point and stick to our guns about what is right and what's wrong. And so much of what's happening in this country now, we know is, I feel like in the time I've been on this earth that we're moving back 50 paces, 100 paces, you know, and it is frustrating. Jeff can tell you, he hears it all the time. That's my husband. I you know, that I'm frustrated. I stay up late at night like I did when I was a social worker working with my kids. I have a lot of sleepless nights about what's happening for the next generation. So my thing is not just to talk about it, but to do something.
Right.
You know, register. Today we were at school registering kids, 18-year-olds to vote.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to barbershops, talking to young men about why they're not voting and what their reasons are for not voting. Getting out in the community, talking to people, giving them a reason to vote, because their vote's gonna make a difference. You know, voting for, you know, for Dr. Peaches, voting for whomever it is that's gonna make a change, to make a change in this community that we want to see. So I mean, so there's various things we can do, but we gotta do something. You know, it's like you said, like it's been said, do something. We've got to do something.
When I was a child, blacks stayed on this side of town.
Yes.
And whites stayed on this side of town. But now we're mixed. One of the things you can do is go knock on the door and say, "Hi, I'm LaRue. Welcome to the neighborhood."
Absolutely.
You know, and get friendly with them and let them know you, and they will know you, and you know them.
Yes.
And you'd be surprised. Some that come to your house and be so friendly because they don't know you. And that's one of the things that you can invite your neighbors to tell them who you are and that you're a good person, you know.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I was from Chicago, but I grew up in Freeport, Illinois, which was very segregated. There was a bridge, there was a river, and near it, we didn't cross. You know, we knew better then, you know, to go certain places. So even though my existence growing up to a certain age was Chicago, which is actually one of the most segregated cities in the whole nation, if you know, according to Dr. Martin Luther King. And it still is very segregated. So that's not something that's akin just to Waco. Those areas devoid of integration is everywhere. But there's so many things we can do, and like I said before, in terms of being vocal about what's happening, not being afraid to speak the truth, voting, making sure that we're getting the word out to people about what needs to happen, and be bold about it. You gotta be bold.
Yeah, Mrs. Lewis.
Thank you for that, because I also define myself as someone who worshiped at the altar of voting and civil rights. Voting has changed my life. Civil rights has changed my life. And Waco and Baylor has an incredible history of the people in Texas who have done good things. Not all politicians, unlike the folk today, are crooks or liars. So let me just share a few with you. Not just Ann and Governor Ann Richards and David Richards, who was over the Texas AFL-CIO and who partnered with Paul Ragsdale to sue to make sure that we had single-member districts in the counties in East Texas that were populous. Governor Mark White, that I knew from my days as a young Democrat, and I just think about today, if he'd had a second term, the kinds of things we were trying to do, the bullet train, economic development, and of course, my political mentor, Bob Bullock. You are absolutely correct. It's all about the numbers. Politics is not about how you feel. Right. We don't care. It's a game of power and money and procedures and rules. And we have been woeful in not educating ourselves or our children about how this game that determines our lives works, because we don't vote. Saying I don't like politics is like saying I don't like air. It's there whether you like it or not, and some politician is regulating whether you have air conditioning or not. So thank you. That has been my lifelong crusade. It's all about the numbers. We can change Waco and we can change the world if we stop complaining and figure out what can I do. I used to sit around in the UT Union in the black room, 30,000 white folks and about 80 or 90 black folk, and we spent 2 hours talking about the man. Or we were in the Catholic Student Center. That's why I'm a hippie Catholic. That's where we planned the revolution. And the Methodist Student Center, Reverend Baylor. But after a couple of hours, because we had to go study, the question was, okay, we've defined the problem. What can you do about it? And so I'd like to end this by saying I hope that we Waco natives can attach ourselves to Baylor's rich history of producing some incredible public servants who tried to make this state better, and that we increase our numbers here in Waco and in the state of Texas, because neither Democrats nor Republicans have won since we voted for Jimmy Carter. It's more people who didn't vote. And that saddens me, because that's a privilege and a gift that now we're in danger of losing that.
Sure.
So yes, we must. And take your children. Mr. Harvey, the way back in the days of John Connally and the Texas Democrats when they were a real power, Mr. Harvey paid me and Lovey Johnson Foster 25 cents per street when we were in junior high to go door to door in the black community to pass out the flyers for Lyndon Johnson for president, because the people who worked in, this was during the days of poll tax, because people who lived in the projects couldn't vote. And we need to take that momentum forward from where we are now, because if we don't, the segregation, racism, classism, sexism, disregard for people with disabilities, it's all on the table. They're voting on it at the Texas Capitol between now and June 2nd. So thank you.
You know, as Tyler said earlier, there's two horrific events in these narratives, but there's a lot of stories told, and there's a lot of themes that are presented. And I was struck by, in all of your narratives, hope. There's hope as a thread in all of your narratives, and so I'm glad that's coming out here, but hope and action at the same time. And so I wish we had more time for all your questions, but we've only asked for so much time of our panelists, but I'm sure they would welcome a conversation with you if you want to come down and visit. And Tyler's going to have copies of his books out there for sale. Will you sign them, Tyler? Will you all sign them?
I'll sign.
Yeah. All right. 4 signatures. So be sure and stop by and pick up one of the books as well.
Excuse me. Sir,
She's making maybe had something she
I just want to say this. To the question, what would you like to see in Waco in 50 years? I'd like to see East Waco look like West Waco.
Wow.
And West Waco look like North Waco. And all of Waco look alike. Financially, demographically, and all come together. That's what I'd like to see. And I hope we can accomplish that. I believe we can. I believe some of you can.
It's okay.
Sure. Last time, and then I'll wrap it up.
One thing that I wanted to plug is narrative, storytelling. It is so important. Please don't undersell the power of narrative. My father used to tell stories, and he would very angrily say, "These are not stories. This is your history." And he would tell us that as we were riding in the car. What that did for us was to give us a sense of the grandness of our family and of our people. And so, though those were stories that were talking to the choir, those stories took me to the University of Texas, where I didn't have no more sense than to think I was the best thing since sliced bread.
It took me to Columbia University, where I knew in the back of my head, my daddy had told me literally I was perfect. And guess what? I believed it. And so those stories, though they are to our children and our grandchildren, there are stories that they would take out into the world. And so when somebody came at me and said, oh, you just here because of affirmative action, I said, oh, aren't you glad? Because that means you get to meet me. That's the power of narrative. So please remember that we have always, in the Black community, and I'm sure in other oppressed communities as well, our history did not appear in the textbooks that we use. No. Our history was at church, and not just on February every year. It was all the time. All the time. And so I really, really, really thank you for the narrative and putting it out there. And I want to encourage all of us to continue sharing those narratives with our children and our grandchildren, because that way they will never die and they will not be whitewashed and they will get shared. Remember, guys, that is what they are afraid of. Yeah. Those stories have now been shared, and their children know that history now. Right. And that is what's important. And by sharing with our own children, it will get out to the broader community. So I just want to plug narrative.
Jeffrey Archer, the Dean of Libraries, University Libraries, Museums, and the Press, and I want to thank my colleagues for hosting this, but more so, thank you for the stories that we have, not only in person, but in the print. If you want to pick up a copy outside, there are refreshments as well. And what better thing just to signify we're here at Baylor having even this kind of talk. Yeah. So I think it shouldn't be lost on anyone. And for the crowd we had at least another 40 plus because there were a couple faculty that had their students say you needed to be part of this event. So not just here, we had multiply that by online. So thanks everyone. Let the stories continue to be told.
And cross Baylor University. But my brother was the first Black to graduate from Baylor University. So that's amazing to me.
Amen. Please hear what?
Continue the conversations, grab a book, grab some signatures, and eat all the food.
Thank you for listening to Et Al., a podcast from Baylor University Press. We hope you've enjoyed today's episode. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to keep up with the latest from Et Al.